Well, good evening and welcome. Welcome to this 14th edition of Atlas Information Live. We are glad that you could join us this evening, in which, well, first of all, I have to apologize because we have a bit of a frog in our throat. And we may be doing a lot of throat clearing as we progress through this evening. But apart from that, we hope everyone is doing well, faring well this fine September evening as we begin to usher in October. Tonight, we wanted to share with you a topic which, of course, relates to suffering. Relates to suffering that we all share on one level or another, in one form or another. We all suffer from some form of ongoing, chronic, persistent challenge. We may refer to this as stress, agitation, anxiety, depression. There is something, and only you know what that is for you, that you consistently and persistently have to face. Not constant in the sense of an ongoing, non-stop affliction, but it's something which is recurring and keeps coming back again and again. And it comes and goes, and we have fits of it, we have bouts of it. But we know what it is when we're going through it. And while we're experiencing it, it's like an old nemesis or an old friend or an old acquaintance that we can't seem to get rid of. Keeps returning. And we know that this is very common in this day and age. I mean, the words stress, anxiety, and depression are ubiquitous in this culture, in this society. In fact, around the world, but especially Western societies and modern societies. This affliction of constant stress, people living in constant anxiety or suffering from ongoing depression. And Roy says, yes, it's a spiral of life. It's a spiral of life because we continue to revisit and tread the same ground over and over again. As we've discussed in the past, our egos, what we suffer from, are there to teach us, to test us, to challenge us. They are our mountains which we must climb. CCAT says, we are living in a society not fit for the human condition. Well, actually, yes and no. We are not fit. We are living in a society which is not fit for true human beings. But in the present human condition of this humanity, this society is ideal for us. And why is that? Because so much out there is a reflection of our subconscious mind, of the collective subconscious of this humanity. So much suffering and extremism and tribalism and conflict and that's out there in the world is, yes, it's karma. But that karma is a reflection of our subconscious condition, of the collective subconscious of this humanity and the karma of the planet. Karma is not out there. Remember, nothing is out there. Out there is an illusion. Out there doesn't exist in the strictest sense. Out there is a projection of our own consciousness and of our own mind and of our own egos. So our karma becomes part of that matrix. Thank you, Aaron. And it's that matrix which we experience out there. And incidentally, it's that matrix which our egos want us to obsess over and identify with. The immediate gratification generation for everyone now is so bad for us. Indeed, this instant gratification, this desire for immediate response to our every whim and our every desire, this is the nature of the ego. This is the nature of our demons, of our vices, of our defects, that are constantly identified and attached to the matrix out there and into one of two conditions: either bringing into ourselves from that matrix the illusions that we identify with and attach ourselves to, and bringing them into our life. So you have this obsession with the new age of attracting what we desire, manifesting what we desire, and using the law of attraction to bring the abundance and bring the love and bring the everything that we want. Well, that's consumption. That's just spiritual consumption. That's just a fancy pants way of doing what everybody else is doing, but on a so-called spiritual level. And you can say that's from our upbringing, from our parents, Aaron, but it's not. We can't blame what we are on the people that raised us. That's modern psychology's view, and that's an incorrect view. We were born into the families we were born into because of our karma. They were there to help us, and believe it or not, they have helped us, even those who have suffered trauma at the hands of their parents. As difficult as that may seem, trauma is, we attract trauma into our own life. Trauma is there to activate and rekindle in us that which we brought into the world when we were born into it, our own karma. And that karma, those egos, have to be brought to the surface in order for us to be able to deal with them, to cope with them, to wrestle with them. Yeah? Now, Aaron says, but our parents brainwashed us to our beliefs. Did they? For many, perhaps. But those individuals are brainwashed everywhere they go. They brainwash themselves. Individuals who are obsessed with beliefs they're going to be brainwashed anywhere they go. So being brainwashed, you might as well be brainwashed by your parents, who at least are going to give you some sort of, well, presumably have given you some sort of coping mechanism, survival skills of some kind, brainwashing or no brainwashing. We want to get away from looking at the world and looking at ourselves on the level of the mind. The mind is just the surface. And in fact, that's exactly what today's talk is about. What we, and this is also, CCAT, we're not talking about reprogramming ourselves. What is the use? What is the use of reprogramming yourself? What is the use of throwing out one program and replacing it with a new program, when all programs do are operate dumb binary machines? Do you want to remain a dumb primary machine, a dumb binary machine? Because that's what you're doing if you reprogram yourself. You cannot learn the truth by programming, Aaron. You cannot know the truth through programming. All you can know is the program. All you can know is what the program tells you. And that's not truth. That's the illusion of truth. We are here to get beyond illusion. We are here to get into the facts. We are here to bust through the matrix in and pass the code into the real world, because there is a real world. And if we keep peeling back the layers and peeling back the layers and peeling back the layers of ourself, we will enter a space of love, space of severity and mercy, of infinite knowledge and infinite wisdom. The great I am that I am, which is all there is. But it's not enough to believe this in the mind. And it's not even enough to feel this in the heart. Because the heart is just another level, it's just another layer. We need to experience this in our very being, and not just our being, but the being of our being, our being's being, the perfect multiple unity of the cosmic Christ, the Logos, the Word, the fire of fire and the light of lights. But how do we get there? And how do we get there when we go through life with what amounts to a boat anchor dragging us down and pulling us down always back into this place of chronic whatever, chronic stress? Perhaps it's an addiction. Perhaps it's food. Perhaps it's gambling. Perhaps it's video games. Perhaps it's sex. It can be any number of conditions. Perhaps it's failed relationships, repeating patterns that keep showing up in our life, various different areas of our life. But we plucked out these three words, stress, anxiety, and depression, because of their commonality and because they sort of cover the gambit of what we'll be looking at. And this word wrestling denotes several things. The first thing that wrestling suggests is combat, hand-to-hand combat. But wrestling is a specific kind of combat. Wrestling is grappling. Wrestling is a very crude and brutal dance. Wrestling is a particular kind of hand-to-hand martial engagement in which one wrestler seeks to dominate and subdue the other. But it's this dance. And if you watch two very good wrestlers, even perhaps sumo wrestlers, which is a bit of well, not a bit, it's taken very seriously in Japan. And you see these tremendous physical bodies locked in this battle to dominate the ring and to subdue their opponent. And it takes incredible strength, but also grace. And it's this dance. There's another interesting aspect about wrestling, which we should keep in the back of our mind as we progress through today's talk. And that is, it's a spectator sport. Wrestling has always been a spectator sport. You would be hard-pressed to find individuals who are actually locked in combat, in serious combat for their lives, doing wrestling moves. Wrestling is this spectator sport. It's about domination. It's about overcoming the other person. It's strategic. It's tactical. It's all of these things, but it's not to the death. If you're looking for that, well, you got to turn to mixed martial arts and some other things to see. And mixed martial arts incorporates aspects of wrestling. They can use wrestling moves, but it's not wrestling. Wrestling was always a spectator sport, going all the way back to the Greeks and the Olympic times, and then later in the Roman times. Of course, they went to the gladiatorial arena. They went to blood sport. Wrestling wasn't enough for them, wasn't exciting enough for them. In modern times, when we think about wrestling, certainly wrestling is a spectator sport. It's one of the most popular spectator sports on television. And there is something peculiar about the brand of wrestling that is shown on television these days. And that is, it's fake. It's scripted. Wrestling is a story. It's a what kind of story is it? It's a soap opera. It's an opera. It's high drama. It's archetypal characters. It's heroes and villains squaring off of each other against each other in the squared circle. It's giants and giants among men. If you remember Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan and the back in the 80s, and the some might call the golden age of wrestling, although to the best of our knowledge, wrestling is still doing fine and well today. And it was all scripted. It was a play. It was tremendous physicality, tremendous physical contact, tremendous moves and everything. But it was a spectator sport, and it was a play. And it was entertainment. It was fun. It was fun for the spectators, and it's fun for the wrestlers. Because let's face it. Hello, D. Let's face it, wrestling is, if you don't enjoy wrestling, how could you be an Olympic wrestler if you weren't passionate about wrestling, if you didn't enjoy it? How could you be a WWF wrestler if you didn't enjoy the theatrics of it all, and the face paint, and the physicality, and the stunts? It's a game. It's a game. Wrestling is a sport, but it's also a game. It's a test of skill. It's a test of strength. And in the case of television wrestling, it's a test of one's ability to tell a story and embody a character, an archetype, and play that character and play that role to entertain the audience. But if we stretch, and we really have to stretch now and say it's a soap opera, and if we stretch that soap opera a little bit further and we say it's an opera of physicality, of physical motion, it's like if you combined ballet with martial combat. If you combine ballet with MMA and scripted it, like ballets are scripted, then what do you get? You get what we said at the beginning. It's a dance, and it's a play, and it's a spectator sport. Now, why are we spending all this time on this word wrestling? Because look at what we have combined the word wrestling with. Wrestling with stress, anxiety, depression, or any affliction, addictions, self-loathing, narcissism, eating disorders, yo-yo dieting, exactly, CCAT. If wrestling out there has all of these connotations to it, imagine if you could deal with the wrestling internally, what you face, what you wrestle with. Imagine if you could somehow conceptualize and see it for what it is, it's an opera, it's a morality play, it's entertainment, it's fun, it's a dance. And it's not real. It's an illusion. It's just a game. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. If you get into a wrestling ring, those Olympic wrestlers, they are buff. They are powerful. They are strong. They are healthy. Why? Because they wrestle. Because they dance. This physical, martial grappling. They grapple with. But grappling like Batman with a grappling gun and whizzing up the side of the building, right? To grapple, to wrestle. It's not this life and death. It's not this struggle of suffering and pain and all this anxiety. If we contextualize it properly, if we see it for what it is, and we break free of the lies that our ego mind and that contemporary psychology and that our own mind and our own conditioning and our own experiences and our own suffering and our ego's reaction to that suffering want to convince us that it is. Well, and so what is it, right? Let's look at a practical example, right? I am depressed, or I am stressed, I am anxious, I am sad, I am whatever, I am fat, I am lazy, I am a loser, the whatever. You put anything after that I am. And you should know, all of you should know this by now, if you've watched any of our live streams before, but we'll remind you, this is a bold-faced lie. I am not depressed, and neither are you, and neither is anyone. No one is depressed. How can we say that? Well, we just got through and saying how it's such a common thing. Well, let's look up depression on Wikipedia. Well, you pull up depression on Wikipedia. I don't see a picture of you. Do you? I mean, unless you're this guy. If you're this guy, okay, all right. If you're this guy, then fine. You can say that you're depressed. But unless you're this guy, you are not depressed. There is no photo of you, or or you're this woman, right? If you're this woman or this man, you can claim to be depressed. You are depressed, right? I am depressed. But look, there's no other pictures of anybody here who's depressed. Your picture is not here under the definition of depression, and neither is mine. You are not depressed. I am not depressed. This is a lie. This is a lie that our egos tell us. To what? To keep us trapped in the conditioned wrong think, the prison of the mind about what these things are, what depression and anxiety and stress is. So what's the alternative? This, brothers and sisters, is the cold, hard fact. I feel depressed. I feel anxious. I feel stressed. I'm going through a bout of depression right now. Listen to that language. I'm going through a bout of depression. What is a bout? I'm not saying that because I'm Canadian, because I'd be saying a boot, right? No, a bout of depression is the equivalent of saying a wrestling match with depression. A fit of depression means an attack or a fit of anxiety, right? An anxiety attack. Roy makes a good point here. I am Aum, right? Whenever you say I am blank, you are creating identification. You are creating an attachment. The New Age people would say you are affirming something, but you're really only affirming it in your mind, right? And if it's a lie, then you're affirming a lie in your mind. You're creating illusion. In fact, you're creating more delusion. You are deluding yourself by saying, I am stressed, I am anxious. And that is reinforcing the program. That is reinforcing the conditioning. And no one's doing this to you. You're doing it to yourself. But if I'm going through a bout of depression, I am going through this wrestling match with depression right now. And I'm passing through troubled waters. I'm passing through this right now, which means it came and it will go. I'm just passing through right now. I'm just a passerby. I'm passing through. I'm watching. I am a spectator, in other words. I experience it. I am experiencing stress. I'm experiencing anxiety. This is the first step. I feel it. We don't want to live in denial. We don't want to reject. We don't want to reject the experience. We're here to experience, and we're here to learn something from that experience. But we're here to dance in that experience. We're here to wrestle. And remember, wrestling is fake. It's scripted. This has all been scripted by our Divine Mother. This bout of depression, this bout of anxiety, this bender that we went on, whether it's alcohol or drugs or food. And believe me, we know about going on benders. And we don't drink, we don't do drugs, we don't smoke, but believe me, we're Hungarian and trust us, our challenge is food, right? Sugar, chocolate, you name it. That's what we go through. That's what we have to deal with. The constant allure and the constant yo-yo back and forth, and the binging, right? The binge eating, and going through 3 or 4 days of binging on ice cream or whatever. This is something that we go through on a regular basis, and we just come around and around and around and back to it again. And we can get off of it, and this is what they call yo-yo dieting. And we'll get to why that is. We'll get to the exact mechanics of how all that works in just a little bit. But we don't want to make light of this point that we're making here. To feel depressed, to feel stressed, to feel anxiety, to feel anything, to feel desired, to feel excited. D asks, what is yo-yo dieting? We'll get to it in a little bit. Just hold that thought, and we'll get to the yo-yo dieting in the bit when we talk about the mechanics of the law of the pendulum. But we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We don't want this point to be lost, and we want to stretch this out to encompass every experience that we have. I am the greatest. I am a loser. I'm so stupid. How many times do we find ourselves saying things like that? Just our self-talk. And identifying and attaching ourselves to delusion and reinforcing that on the level of programming of the mind. Do we catch ourselves when we say that, when we do that? Because I do that. I do that all the time, but I catch myself doing it. I see myself doing it. I watch myself doing it. I say, there my mind is wrestling. There I am wrestling with my ego, that shame, that pride. because we talked about in the past how shame and pride are the two sides of the same coin. Okay, so what this means is that egos use the mind and use our emotions and use our sensations to create these lies, these illusions, these delusions. And for the most part, we can recognize the underlying ego. So if I say I am hungry, or I'm starving, or I'm dying for some chocolate, it's sort of easy on the surface to recognize what ego is behind that statement. But when I feel depressed, or I feel anxiety, or I feel stressed, it's not so easy to get at the underlying cause of that stress because it's beneath the surface. Today, we're going to really be delving into the subconscious mind and egos that remain hidden beneath the surface where we don't typically have access to them. But they still affect us. And how they affect us are these persistent, ongoing, nagging conditions that we experience on the surface. But we need to be able to dive beneath the surface and recognize what is truly the root cause of those surface conditions. So, for example, stress, anxiety, agitation, this is what we can experience on the surface. And what's beneath causing that? That's the ego of fear. And its corollary, just as pride is shame and pride are two sides of the same coin, fear and control are two sides of the same ego. The desire to control is just fear. Because fear of outcomes means you desire control of outcomes. But this means that when you penetrate into your anxiety and penetrate into your stress, into your agitation, your dis-ease, your psychological dis-ease, your emotional dis-ease, we want to recognize that these are symptoms. Anxiety is a symptom. Stress, a symptom. Agitation, a symptom. Dee says that this is a good topic because she's taking psychology classes right now. You will probably be taught anxiety and stress and agitation as if they are themselves some kind of psychological condition. They are not. Modern psychology has taken an allopathic approach to mental health. In other words, they treat symptoms. They don't treat causes. They try to treat anxiety. You can't treat anxiety. Well, they medicate for anxiety. They try to treat stress. So they give you all of these, stress exercises and meditation and try to de-stress and relaxation and do this and do that to try to control your stress and get your stress under control. Listen to those words. Try to get your anxiety under control. Try to get your stress under control. Let's not put too fine a point on it. But actually, you know what? This one, we're going to do, look at this word right here. Okay. I'm going to go back to pen here. Now, if anxiety, stress, and agitation have at their root the dual ego of fear and control, how does desiring to control your anxiety and stress and agitation eliminate the ego of control? Can somebody answer that for me? D, ask your psychology teacher. How does the desire to control circumstances, for example, if you're stressed out at work, or agitation, you're agitated by your lover, you're agitated by your family, you're agitated when you go out in public because you have social anxiety disorder. You feel agitation when you're on a plane because you have fear of flying. Or you feel agitation when you're in a group setting because the group is not listening to you. You're not being heard, and you desperately want to be heard. You want your point to be made. You want to control the situation. You want to control others. You want to control life. You want to control your workplace. You want everything to conform to your safe space, to your comfort and security. And when these circumstances, which don't perfectly align with your desires for the specific things that give you comfort and security, you desire to change them. You want to control the situation. You want to control and change the circumstances. When you can't do that, you become agitated. You become even angry, or you become stressed, and you feel it in your bones. You feel it in your muscles. You feel it in your tension in your neck, or wherever you feel it, or your heart. You feel it emotionally. You feel it mentally. Your mind starts racing, starts going like the hamster starts running in the wheel like mad. So how can you overcome that through desiring to control even more? The answer is simple. You cannot. It is impossible. You cannot overcome an ego while you are feeding an ego, while you are indulging it. If you are using an ego, if you are in an ego, the desire to control, you cannot overcome the desire to control while you are desiring to control. So, but in wrestling, you still want to subdue your opponent. Wrestling is all about control, isn't it? Modern psychology won't tell you that, though. No, they won't tell you what we just told you. Of course not, because they don't know what we just told you. Because they don't know it. Because they have no concept of egos in the metaphysical sense. Because they think that's just reductionism. They say, no, anxiety is entirely different from stress. Is it? How so? It's just a different symptom. It's a different manifestation of the same underlying ego. Let's look at another example. Depression. Depression, beneath the surface, is anger. Now, we know this one very well because we suffer from depression. We also have suffered from we've also suffered from anxiety and what's the word, the expression we're looking for? Insecurity. We were very insecure as a child. We suffered terrible insecurity. And well, anyway, we maybe can get into more of that detail later. I think we've discussed this in the past anyway. But the reason why there's an asterisk here next to our there's our pen. There's an asterisk here next to our word anger. And that's because we know that anger very often has another ego behind it. Anger is like the last expression of it. Like we can be very angry, but usually there's a reason behind our anger. And so, for example, there can be sexual frustration, lust. There can be fear. And fear very often turns into anger because, again, it's this word control. And when we lose control, we don't have control, someone takes control away from us, or someone tries to control us, fear begets fear. So if somebody is afraid of us and is trying to control us, we react with fear. We react with controlling them. And when the fear begets fear, and then it becomes this, they start feeding each other, we get this downward spiral, it degenerates into anger and yelling and screaming and fighting. So how does all of that become depression on the surface? Well, if you can use your imagination and visualize wrath and ego raging in your subconsciousness, in the subconscious mind, raging, just fuming with seething anger, but it's below the surface. So what comes to the surface but that toxicity, that negativity, that when someone is seething with anger, and if you're just in the same room with them, because they're using up energy. Anger requires tremendous energy to sustain. Frustration, anger sucks the life right out of us. And the number one symptom of depression is lack of energy. The energy is sucked out of us from within. And again, I know depression intimately, very well. I mean, studied it for literally decades within myself, and all the different facets of it and how it operates. And it just, you know, like, speak to anybody who suffers from chronic depression. They'll tell you, you just can't get out of bed in the morning, or you feel as though you can't get out of bed in the morning. You have no motivation to do anything. The life force, the chi, the prana, everything is just being drained out of you. Well, it's not being drained out of you outside of you. It's being drained out of you into this seething demon of anger. But again, this anger is very often a working hand in hand with another underlying ego, be it fear, be it lust. It can be other egos as well. It can be gluttony or envy, or, you know, it can be other egos as well. But the primary ones are lust and fear. So trying to deal with depression, you're wrestling with you're wrestling with a shadow. Trying to deal with anxiety, stress, or agitation, you're wrestling with a shadow. What you need to be wrestling with is down here, not up here. This is the surface. What about addiction and self-sabotaging behavior, self-sabotaging tendencies? Because addiction is self-sabotaging, but there are other expressions of self-sabotaging which do not appear as addiction. They don't have the same qualities or characteristics as an addiction, but their underlying cause, beneath the surface, it's self-loathing, which is, again, this asterisk, right? Self-loathing isn't an ego. Self-loathing is just another manifestation or expression, but it's a different layered level. We include it here because just to say shame doesn't say enough. Oh, I'm ashamed. Because the word shame has a connotation with it. Oh, I'm ashamed. Oh, no, it's okay. No, it's fine to be ashamed of yourself. I'm ashamed of this accident. I'm ashamed of that. We were raised to be ashamed of various different things. But self-loathing is a very particular kind of shame. It's self-hate. It's right. So it's shame combined with anger, right, to create the self-loathing, this hatred towards oneself. So self-loathing, in many ways, is the polar opposite of narcissism, which is self-love, too much self-love. So if you combine, so which is, again, pride. These are all related. Pride taken to an extreme is narcissism, too much self-love. The flip side of pride, shame, taken to extreme, is self-loathing. But again, it has this anger component to it, because anger leads to hate, leads to violence. And if you think about racism, systemic hatred, or any sort of systemic hatred, it can be racism, it can be sexism, misogyny, misandry, homophobia, seething contempt, hatred, to the point where one is willing to commit acts of violence to eradicate, to exterminate the other in a bid to resolve the anger, the hatred. Now apply that subconsciously to oneself. And you can see how self-loathing manifests as addiction, but also there's extreme forms of this include cutting, scarring, but there's also psychological self-sabotage. So one will go into work and one will deliberately behave in ways whereby one's success is one's success is guaranteed to fail, if we can say it that way. One is guaranteed to fail. One sets oneself up so that they're guaranteed to fail. So success is not an option. Why? Because many people fear success. And again, you have this fear coming into play. And the desire to control, right? To control outcomes. So I'm self-sabotage. I'm sabotaging myself, and I'm doing so by sabotaging external circumstances and future things from happening or not happening. I'm sabotaging my own success, my own ability, or I'm sabotaging myself physically. This is another type of control. It's interesting. It's interesting how anxiety and stress and depression, many of which are rooted in fear, but then we also find addiction, self-sabotage, also have this fear and control component. You see now why this covidiocy around the world is completely focused on fear. Because fear is in many ways the antithesis of love. And fear is, according to Frank Herbert's Dune, fear is the mind killer. What he really meant by that is fear is the consciousness killer. Fear is the hypnotist. But fear is, in Star Wars parlance, fear is Darth Sidious. Fear is Emperor Palpatine. Fear lurks in the shadows. What is the subconsciousness? What is beneath the surface? Out of sight, out of mind, operating from the shadows, operating from the depths, from the darkness. It's fear. And what is it doing? It's controlling. And how is it controlling? With illusion and delusion. It does this pantomime for us on the surface. This to distract us, to bait and switch us, to get us to focus on anxiety and stress and agitation and depression and addiction and self-sabotage and all those things out there and all those people that are, and victimhood and victimization, which is another just self-loathing, right? It's a toxicity. And then there's a passive-aggressive behavior and all this sort of toxic narcissism and everything else. And it's all stemming from what's beneath the surface in the subconscious mind. And these are the causes. And fear and control always are there. Why? Because the subconscious is fear. That's why it's subconscious. That's why it's hidden. Fear is afraid. Fear cannot be anything but what it is. How can fear be anything other than what it is? It is a program. Fear fears. Fear hides in the shadows. The whole of the subconscious mind is fear, which is why it's so difficult to penetrate. Because it doesn't want you to see it. It wants to remain hidden. It wants to remain, and it's going to throw up all this bullshit on the surface, which is going to make you suffer from it. It's a wrestler that's throwing you all these like different moves and stuff, and it's getting you tangled up, like it's getting you grappled up and tangled up in its arms and its limbs and its legs, in order to subdue you, to keep you down, to keep you from pinning it down. Egos lie. Egos do not tell the truth. Their modus operandi is deception and illusion and delusion. That is what they do. There is no truth in ego. Period. End of story. Anybody who tells you otherwise, they're speaking through ego, and it's the Black Lodge lying to you. The ego's very divinely ordained purpose is to be that. If our goal is truth, objective reality, and truth and love, the ego's divinely ordained purpose is to oppose and challenge and test that. How do you oppose and test and challenge objective truth? With lies, with illusion, with deception, and with subjective truths. Alternative facts, they said in the US media, right? Alternative facts, alternative truth, whatever. They use this nonsense. This, brothers and sisters, is such a fundamental and self-evident experiential knowledge. This is so self-evident when you spend 5 minutes in meditation on this. It just totally becomes clear. And look at CCAT made this comment a few minutes ago, and we think it's perfectly apropos to the conversation. We get comfortable being uncomfortable. So when things get comfortable, we have to make things uncomfortable again. Is that not the kind of the perfect kind of convoluted, ring around the rosy type game, going around and around and around and around, where these egos are creating this surface level, these waves on the surface, and we're desperately trying to navigate these waves on the surface. And meanwhile, the whole while, it's these undercurrents that are going around and around, causing these waves and these ripples and these maelstroms and storms that we get caught up in on the surface. And it's all for control, and to keep our eye off of them, to keep our eye off the ball. And they're really good at it, because contemporary psychology knows nothing of what we're talking about here. The contemporary psychology is focused up here. They say, well, we're going to help you with your anxiety. We're going to help you with your depression. We're going to help you with your addiction. No, you can't help anybody with their depression and their anxiety and their addiction. You have to get in beneath the surface and help them with their fear and their need to control and their anger and their lust and their self-loathing, their shame, their pride. That's what you have to help them get at, beneath the surface, in the subconsciousness. This is why Carl Jung said, until you make the subconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. Everything that we experience on the surface has its origin somewhere in our subconsciousness, because that's the modus operandi of egos, to lie, to deceive, and to hide from us. But now, let's, we talked about wrestling. We talked about having fun. How do you have fun with any of this? Anybody who has suffered from any of this stuff, fun is the last word that comes to mind, right? None of this is fun, right? And why isn't it fun? Well, because when the storm hits, and the storm comes, we've all faced it. We've all been in the storm. And that storm of psychological hell, emotional, mental, sometimes physical suffering. And it's this storm. And while we're in it, this is what we're going through. We're going through whatever it is we're going through on the surface. And then beneath the surface, these things are having their way with us. And it's lightning, and it's thunderbolts, and the waves, and the crashing waves, and everything else. And we feel totally and completely lost at sea. Where's the fun in any of that? Where's the fun in any of this? And where's the wrestling match? Here. Right? Where's the, picture yourself in that little boat, in that little dinghy. It's not a dinghy, it's a skiff. But you got the idea. This isn't some great galleon even. It's not a cruise ship. It's a skiff. It's a rowboat. Row your boat gently down the stream. I don't see a gently rowing stream here. There is no merrily, merrily, merrily. Yeah, life is but a dream, but life is a freaking nightmare here. And we all know it. We've been there. Each and every one of us. We've experienced this. We've experienced ourselves just barely trying to keep our heads above water, trying to keep ourselves from capsizing and going down into the deep and truly, truly being lost at sea. And whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's stress, addiction, self-loathing, binging, the dark night of the soul, when we're in the ninth circle of hell, or it feels like it, and nothing is going our way, and we're being tossed back and forth by the waves, and it's all coming crashing down around us. You know, how do you, how? Here's how. When it's darkest, and when it's the worst, and when we feel most lost and most in it, that's any ship captain, right, who's in that situation. They look to the lighthouse. We picked this image on purpose because the boat is empty. There's no one in the boat, right? You are not the boat. You are the light, and you are the lighthouse keeper, shining the light of consciousness on your vessel, on your mortal vessel, the one that gets tossed back and forth in the water. If you remain identified with the boat, right? If you remain identified with the boat, and the boat is not just our body, the boat is our mind, and the boat is our heart. The boat is our energy. The boat is our vessel. The lighthouse keeper is our innermost being, our true self, the keeper of the light, the one who has the ability to focus our consciousness, to draw our attention, to observe, in other words. And the light is the being of our being. Our innermost intimate Christ, the cosmic Christ, the Logos, is the light that comes through consciousness, that our being puts into focus when we remain mindful and aware and self-observant. If you're in the lighthouse and you're pointing the light and you're shining the light on the boat amidst the waves, are you in danger? Is your life at risk? Is your life in peril? Are you so identified with the boat? You're on safe and solid ground. You're in the lighthouse. And you're keeping a close eye, you're keeping a close watch on the boat. It's not going to be lost at sea. And the storm will pass. as Seacat says here, the sun will rise again. The crazy waves will die down. So what's there to fret about? What's there to worry about? This healthy distance, this healthy separation, this is the separation that can help us. Why? Because if we remain in the boat, then we are separated from the lighthouse keeper and the light. If we're in it and of it, then we're getting tossed around on the waves, and we're getting lost in the maelstrom, and the waves are crashing around us, and we're just in this little dinghy, we're this little skiff, and we're completely at the mercy of circumstances. But if we take ourselves out of ourselves and observe ourselves, observe the boat, observe the vessel going through the storm, and we're shining the light of consciousness on that, but we are rooted soundly and firmly in our being, in our innermost, and that which is infinite and unmoving and unshakable within us, then we can be in it, but not of it. To be in it, but not of it. And then what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and the storm will pass, and the sun will shine, and the seas will calm. This may sound like it's some kind of a metaphor or allegory or just poetic something or other, but it's not. It's a very real, practical, applicable strategy to dealing with what takes place on the surface, because that's where storms happen, and storms happen to the vessel. And this relationship, if we can develop this relationship, learn to be in it but not of it, if we can learn to put practice the lighthouse into practice in our lives, we can endure anything with equanimity and peace. It is what it is. It is what it is. When we say it is what it is, that's like saying, I am that I am. It is what it is. I am what I am. And I am what I am that I am is Aheye, Asher, Aheye is the holy name of God. Now, how different is that from I am depressed, I am anxious, I am so stressed? This is I am depressed, I am anxious, I am so stressed. This, it is what it is. I am what I am what I am. And the light of consciousness reveals that to us. And what's more, the light of consciousness reveals the nature of the storm and all the waves and everything that's happening to the vessel. We can observe it. And then we can discover the secrets of the Leviathan, of the monsters lurking in the deep that conjured up the storm, that caused the storm in the first place, which are those egos which we had talked about, which we had shown earlier. So when there's a great scene from Forrest Gump where Lieutenant Dan and Forrest are on the shrimping boat, and the storm hits, and Forrest is scared, but Lieutenant Dan was mad, and he gets on the crow's nest, and he starts shaking his fist at God, and he said, "Is this the best you can do? You can't sink this boat." And it's this marvelous scene where, of course, it's this reckoning between him and the Almighty, when he feels that he's taking the Almighty to task for having taken his legs in Vietnam, and he's going to square off with God, and he's going to have this wrestling match with God. And sure enough, not only do they survive the storm, but there's this beautiful and touching scene where Lieutenant Dan says to Forrest, he says, "I never thanked you for saving my life." And he jumps in the water, and he's doing this backstroke into the sunset. And Forrest says, "I think in that moment, Lieutenant Dan made his peace with God." The reason why that scene is so beautiful and so touching, and why it's so meaningful, juxtaposed against that scene of them in the storm, because not only does Lieutenant Dan find it in his heart to finally thank Forrest Gump, an idiot, someone for whom he had nothing but contempt all this time, but now he finds it in his heart, the grace and the humility to thank him for saving his life, a life which for the first time in a long time, Lieutenant Dan realizes is not only worth living, but is beautiful and precious and meaningful and purposeful and powerful. And how did he find that out? How did he learn that? By going through this storm, by wrestling with fate itself, by having a wrestling match with God. And of course, if you know the story, you know that what happens is that all the other shrimp boats were destroyed, and all of a sudden shrimping becomes easy, and they form the Bubba Gump shrimp empire, and they become millionaires. And it was all because of this wrestling match. And Lieutenant Dan's approach, even though he's on the boat, but he sees it for what it is. It's a wrestling match. It's a challenge. It's you and me, he says. And we've talked about this before in the past about our egos. Our egos are our adversaries, but they're not our enemies. It's important to keep that in mind. You don't wrestle an enemy. That's why we spend the time that we do on the words that we do, because language is powerful. Words are power and meaning, and language is magical. And in order to extract the truth which is contained within them, we have to fully comprehend holistically all the embedded power, imbued magical power that's sitting in dormant and in latent state. If we want to release that from those words, you don't wrestle an enemy. You shoot an enemy, you stab an enemy, you do mixed martial arts, an enemy, but you don't wrestle an enemy. You wrestle an opponent in a game, in a match, in the Olympics, on TV. You wrestle for a reason. And Lieutenant Dan wrestles God on that boat in the middle of the storm. And it's a beautiful scene because even though Forrest Gump says that Lieutenant Dan is mad, but he's not mad. He's relishing it. He's, for the first time in a long time, he's alive. Perhaps for the first time in his entire life, he's alive in a way that he has never been alive before. And he's going, woohoo! And he's riding these waves, and he's riding in the crow's nest, and it is in this storm, and he's wrestling God. What could be more exhilarating than that? What could be more intense than wrestling with God? Worthwhile keeping in the back of our mind the next time we face the storm, the next time we find ourselves in a fit of anxiety or stress or depression. Remember Lieutenant Dan in the crow's nest. Remember the lighthouse. Because we watch that scene in Forrest Gump as a spectator, as someone in the audience watching a movie. So we can watch Lieutenant Dan in this boat, a character, a personality, our personality, in this boat on this ship, in the middle of a storm, wrestling with God. Why are we wrestling with God? Why is it we're wrestling with God? Because our karma, our egos, are manifestations of our karma. And the law is the Word, and the Word in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And when we are in the lighthouse, and we look to what's going on, to the skiff, to the dinghy in the storm, we say what? We say, it is what it is. And if we say it is what it is, what we're really saying is, I am that I am. And if it is what it is, and I am that I am, and there's a wrestling match going on between it is what it is and I am that I am, then guess what? I am wrestling with God. And in truth, God is wrestling with himself. And what self is God wrestling with? If you've been watching our live streams, you will know that God is wrestling. All of manifest reality is a wrestling match. All of manifest reality is kung fu. It's all the Tao, severity and mercy. Pandas and peacocks. It's this game, and we'll keep coming back to that. It's this game. It's a wrestling match. It's a dance. And it can be fun. It can be exhilarating. It can be challenging, of course. It can even be painful. It can be there's suffering involved, but you don't have to identify with the suffering. You can be in the lighthouse. Right? You can be in the lighthouse. You don't have to be in the skiff. Pandas and peacocks. Lieutenant Dan in the storm. These properties are not just entertainment. This is, Forrest Gump and Kung Fu Panda and so on. The Logos is speaking to us all the time. God is in everything, and God is speaking to us all the time, if we have but the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And by the way, there is a tremendous scene in Kung Fu Panda 2 at the end, which is just this incredibly powerful scene with the fire, and the fire of the fire, and the implication there being the use of white tantra and to overcome our egos. And it's just this tremendous scene. It's worthwhile watching and meditating upon. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. Those who want to avoid pain, those who want to avoid suffering, the entire New Age and their power of positive thinking are completely missing the point. They're completely missing the point of the game. They're not playing the game. They're avoiding the game. They think they can cheat the game, but you can't cheat this game. The people in the Black Lodge, the people doing black magic, think they can cheat the game. They think that by manifesting their desires, they can get the outcome that they desire, that they can control outcomes and control circumstances and avoid suffering and avoid pain. But you cannot cheat this game. Why would God cheat himself? It is what it is, and I am that I am. Why would I cheat? What would be the point? The only point to cheat is to cheat oneself. To cheat God is to cheat oneself. And if God's cheating oneself out of the game, then he's losing the game. He's not winning the game, he's losing the game. Karma is karma. We have to face that. But there is another interesting phenomena. Remember, we began by talking about the persistent nature. That these storms, they come and go. And this is where we're going to talk about things like yo-yo dieting, D. So here we have the storm, and here we have the calm before the storm. And here we have the pendulum swinging back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And in another way, in another form, we can visualize the yin and yang of the Tao. And if you've read the Tao Te Ching, you know that this rotates. And at the North Pole, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good. Bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good. And around and around and around and around and around and around it goes. That is what is being visualized here and what is described in the law of the pendulum. And we are just so grateful that we found this particular pendulum, because it's such a beautiful mechanical looking pendulum, because the law of the pendulum is a mechanical law. And we are governed, this planet is governed by the moon. Mechanical nature is governed by the moon. The moon acts as the pendulum for this planet. And the phases of the moon determine waxing or waning, whether we're on an upswing or a downswing into calm waters or into the storm. And we experience this, personally as well. There's when we're approaching or going through the full moon versus the new moon. And when it's full moon, things are bad, right? I mean, there's more murders and violent crimes, and these statistics don't lie. The full moon is when the egos go crazy. They're empowered. We can get into the metaphysical science behind that, but the moon is reflected light. It is subjective light. It is mechanical. It is not pure light that comes directly from the sun. It's being reflected off the surface of the moon, and the moon is mechanical, and the moon is it's so that light is modified, and it is moonlight. And moonlight, even though lots of people claim moonlight is powerful and they do magic by moonlight, etc., and everything else, well, it's black magic, right? Moonlight doesn't empower white magic. White magic is empowered by solar light, by solar atoms, by solar energy. Moonlight is the light of mechanical nature. It's the light of darkness. It's the light of egos. It's light, but it's modified light. It's subjective light. So this pendulum that we are all caught on, we swing between happy and sad, between success and failure, between profit and loss. And when we diet, if we try to go on a diet, we may do well for 2 weeks on our diet, 3 weeks, but then this pendulum will swing back into the storm, and then we'll go crazy on a full moon or close to a full moon, and we'll binge on Doritos, or we'll go out, or if we're trying to quit smoking, or if we're trying to quit drinking, we'll find ourselves being tempted and falling off the wagon and going on a bender or going on a binge or doing whatever as this pendulum is swinging into the darkness. And all you need to do is observe yourself in your life, and you will see that these chronic things that you suffer from will go on this undulating pattern of the pendulum, where they get worse, and then it eases up, and then it gets worse again, and then it goes bad again, and goes and just, it's like a breath. It's like breathing. It's like any other pattern of nature. It's like any other up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, right? The goal of our spiritual journey is to get off of this pendulum, to get off of these mechanical rides that we are on. This is what this is. It's a swing set. And our goal is to escape this, is to free ourselves. Because all of these cycles, all of these, the law of the pendulum, the law of return, these are all what are empowering and causing our suffering. So why is it important to understand or to know or to see that this law of the pendulum is a thing in our lives? Because as we've described very often, why did that stop now? There we go. Oh, it's going to stop if I try to open something else up. Okay, anyway, we'll keep it going for now. To observe our egos, to observe the causes of our suffering, is the first step to be able to liberate ourselves from our suffering. And the challenge when we are observing things like depression is that observing the depression is just observing the symptom. We can't get anywhere observing depression. We can't get anywhere observing, right? We can't get anywhere observing these things on the surface. We have to observe these things, right? But they're beneath the surface. So how do you observe something that's beneath the surface? Well, the law of the pendulum and understanding that the ebb and flow, we can begin to better recognize what the causes of our symptoms are. What's more is that we can use the law of the pendulum and use the regularity and the mechanicity of that against the egos themselves. So we can know when to be extra vigilant, for example. We can know when to be extra careful. So if we are heading into, for lack of a better expression, we can know when not to put ourselves in harm's way, if that's the right way to put it. So if, for example, we are trying to lose weight, if we're trying to get our gluttony under control, if we're trying to diet and get our fast, and we are aware of our 1 week or 2 week cycle of, being on the pendulum of going from bad to good and back again. If we know that the cycle of the moon is coming, the full moon is coming, we can avoid having certain food in the house that we know is going to be too tempting for us to resist. So we don't buy the ice cream, we don't buy the chips, we don't bring that stuff home with us as the full moon approaches. If we've observed ourselves that is when we binge, that is when we so we can. But then the other thing we can do is pray and meditate, or do fasting, or do other practices, do our prayers of protection, for example, when we are during those times of danger, those heightened moments when we're passing into the storm. We can also do other coping mechanisms that we might have. And when we are dealing with these surface level symptoms, there are many, shall we say, mundane or more pedestrian coping mechanisms that we might have to do. So this is where we can turn to modern psychology and therapy and so on to get some advice on how to manage stress and manage anxiety and manage depression, because we will have to learn how to live with these symptoms. Remember, observing it from the lighthouse is one thing, but when you're suffering from depression, you're dealing with the low energy, you're dealing with the bad feelings, you're dealing with, you can say, I don't identify with it, but you still feel the feelings. And if your mind gets caught up, for example, in anxiety or agitation or self-loathing, self-sabotage, and you have constant, persistent mental patterns that keep showing up. Your mind keeps, you can't get your mind off of whatever is causing you anxiety or worry. There are things you can do. So for example, you can play a game. Take your mind off of the anxiety. Now, are you actually getting to what's causing the anxiety when you're doing that? No. But what you are doing is you are basically distracting yourself from the distraction. And the reality is when you live with any of these things or any sort of chronic mental dis-ease, right? Because that's what illness is, dis-ease, right? Lack of peace, lack of ease. And whether it's anxiety, depression, addiction, it doesn't matter. You live with this, you have to learn how to live with it. People who are alcoholics will tell you that they are alcoholics until the day they die. You never stop being an alcoholic just because you stop drinking. And that's because the demon of alcoholism, the self-loathing, the shame and the pride is still there. If you can somehow manage to eliminate it, then possibly at some point you can say that you're not an alcoholic anymore. But the chemical addiction is probably still in the body. So even if you have tremendous breakthroughs in psychology, it's probably wise not to try drinking again. This is probably true for many hard drugs as well, because of the physiological changes that happen in the body through that addiction. So there's neuropsychological, chemical considerations to be made there. So again, being in it but not of it means learning how to cope, because sometimes this is not enough, right? Sometimes this is just, we can say this, we can do this, we can try to practice this, but this is not easy to do. This is not easy to do. If you suffer from severe depression, severe anxiety, your egos are constantly going to be trying to drag you out of the lighthouse back into the boat. So there are times when if you're going to be in the lighthouse, not in the boat, and you're waiting for the storm to pass, pull out a deck of cards, play some solitaire in the lighthouse. Get your mind out of the boat, because your ego is going to want to keep dragging your mind and your emotions back into that boat and get you to fear losing your life, losing your livelihood, fearing and whatever it is, and suffering, and they want you to ride that boat, but you want to observe that boat and not get caught up in it. So a game can help take our mind off of whatever is weighing heavily on our mind, what we can't get our mind off of. Physical exercise is a great way of burning off energy that has been negatively charged. So depression, anxiety, stress, agitation, the energy has been charged negatively by the ego, been turned into that frustration, that anger, that agitation, stress. So physical exercise, of course, is good to help cope with that. There's lots of activities that we can do, and it doesn't have to be working out even. You can go for a walk, you can clean the house, you can make a meal, you can transmute that negative energy into something positive, in other words. Put on some loud music, put on some Beethoven or some Wagner, put it in your iPod, stick it in your ears, grab the vacuum cleaner, and vacuum the house like you've never vacuumed the house before. You'll be doing something good. You'll be cleaning. You'll be doing something good, and you'll be doing something good for yourself. The Beethoven is going to be helping to transmute all that negative energy into something beautiful. And the physical activity is going to be good for you. We would say, in fact, listening to Beethoven or Mozart or Wagner or Bach or Liszt or just about any beautiful music, classical music or music that's beautiful for you, that really speaks to your heart, put that on and just listen to it. Close your eyes and listen to it and really listen to it. You can also put on a beautiful movie. Sometimes when we're feeling depressed, we will put on Forrest Gump, and we will watch Forrest Gump, or we will watch The Shawshank Redemption, and we will completely and totally just watch the movie and allow ourselves to go into the movie, to take our mind off of, just give ourselves a reprieve from the bad feelings, because sometimes we have to cope. In other words, just because we're in the lighthouse observing ourselves doesn't mean that the vessel isn't suffering and isn't going through a bunch of shit. And the mind and the emotions, they can perhaps use a break from what they're going through. Having said that, we do not want to go so far as to completely block out the storm. We chose this image because the lighthouse is shining light on the boat and on the storm. The vessel needs the lighthouse to be shining on it. That we need the light of consciousness to be observing what's happening in our three brains. So we have to remain mindful. And it's difficult to do. It's hard at times to be in it and not of it and observant of it. So watch the mind going crazy, watch the heart feeling what it's feeling, watch the physical body going through its stress or anxiety or depression or whatever, or the addiction, like getting the shakes, or whether you're on a diet and then you get the cravings, and the cravings burn. Like you really, really, I mean, I don't have to tell you this. You guys all know what this is like. And it's important not to completely shut it out, because there's only one way we're going to get off this pendulum, and that is we got to get to this stuff beneath the surface. And to be in cognition, to be cognizant that these surface level symptoms are just symptomatic of these subconscious causes. All this, we have to remain observant of all of this and cognizant of all of this, these relationships, and then be able to contemplate and meditate and go in deep and say, look, if I'm suffering from anxiety, and anxiety is fear, what am I afraid of? Where is this fear coming from? Why, or what is the nature of this fear? What am I really afraid of? That I suffer from anxiety. And understanding that fear is control, that relationship, you can start to look at other aspects of your life. So one of the things that my family members noticed about me when I'm suffering from depression is how quick to anger I am. And how quickly I would get angry and would snap at them or be frustrated, and I would notice this in myself. And I would lose patience with people like this when I was depressed. Well, because depression is anger, deep-seated subconscious anger. But then in the observance of that, how quickly and why was I losing my patience with people? What was making me angry? Why was I snapping at them? And it was always the case where they weren't adhering to what I wanted. So they were out of control. They were out of my control, or they were doing things. So, for example, one of my pet peeves is I like to cook, and one of my pet peeves is not having my kitchen the way I left it. So, not having my tools and not having my dishes and not having my utensils where I need them to be. So when I'm cooking something, I want to reach and grab my spatula, and I reach and grab the knife and reach and grab, right? So I when I go to grab something and it's not there, very quickly lose patience with whoever didn't put the thing back in its spot, right? That's control. That's fear. And so when we have anxiety, right? Again, it's what are the things when we are stressed, what manifests while we are stressed. Being stressed is one thing. Oh, I'm stressed. But what other behaviors bubble up and show themselves? How do fear and control, because they will, when we are in stress, anxiety, agitation, right? Fear and control are behind that. They're pushing those symptoms to the surface. But that means they themselves, what that means is they are acting close to the surface. They're near to where we can get at them. And they're not very precise. Anxiety is like depression. It's a radiation, which means there's other things going on. Fear is going to fear. Fear is going to control. And it's going to want to do that as much as possible all the time. And it's doing that beneath the surface, and that's what's causing anxiety on the surface, or the stress or the agitation on the surface. But that means it's doing something just below the surface, and we can get at that in the same way that a whaler gets at a whale when it comes up to breathe, or another fisherman, a harpoon fisherman or whatever, gets at a shark when he sees the shark fin come out of the water. It's the same way. The anxiety, the stress is there. What's stressing us out? But then what are these other things that we do when we're stressed out? And then we observe those behaviors, and we keep digging into those behaviors. What's behind that? What's behind that? What's behind that? And then we get a better handle on this subconscious entity, this creature, this opponent, this dragon down in the labyrinth, this Medusa, the Minotaur at the heart of the labyrinth, which is bringing such havoc to the surface world. And we can go in meditation, and we can go hunting for that ego. So it's a balancing act. It's a dance. It's a wrestling match. So, in other words, if you are wrestling with someone, with an opponent, and they've got you in a headlock, or they've got you in a whatever hold, right? You have to get yourself out of the hold before you can turn the tables on your opponent, right? You're not going to be able to pin the opponent if they've got you in a half Nelson or a full Nelson. You got to get out of the half Nelson to the full Nelson first. But that's what it is. It's a wrestling match. And then we can get into the observations, and we cannot observe what is in our subconscious mind. That's its nature. We can only observe what's on the surface, what's bubbling up to the surface, but we can intuit what's beneath the surface. And in meditation and our imagination, we can penetrate into all the levels of our mind. And it is using the power of visualization and meditation and prayer. And you can visualize yourself taking a sword and walking through the labyrinth and walking deeper and deeper and deeper, and visualize those signs that popped up above the surface that gave away those egos down below, and observe how they work. So for example, when I observed myself getting angry because someone didn't put something back in its proper place in the kitchen, I knew that that was me being a control freak. That was fear manifesting as the desire to control, the desire to have absolute control over my dominion, my world, my empire. It's just a kitchen. But you say just a kitchen, it's just a kitchen. And of course you want things to be where you need them to be. I mean, that's no big deal. Really? A control freak is a control freak. Control freak in the kitchen is going to be a control freak in the president's, in the White House, or in the prime minister's office. And believe me, we have a control freak in the prime minister's office here in Canada. And he's terribly, terribly possessed by fear. But let's not get into politics. But this is the process. And then we have these ongoing repetitive conditions that we face, and they are revealing themselves to us on an ongoing basis according to the law of the pendulum. And we just have to maintain that attitude that we've expressed here tonight, where to be in it but not of it, to not identify with these surface level conditions and symptoms, and recognize that what we want to do is keep observing and watching for the signs on the surface that are going to give away the causes beneath the surface, and then dive beneath that surface in meditation and analyze the way in which those particular egos responsible for those symptoms are bringing about our suffering and the suffering of others. And then we can expand that and say, because an ego that's causing depression is it's not only going to be causing depression, it's going to be coming to the surface and acting out in other ways. And again, on this law of the pendulum stuff, so it's going to sometimes behave this way and sometimes behave this way and sometimes behave this way. So all the time. And then finally, what is this trying to teach us? What's it trying to teach me? What's this all about? Everything has a reason. Every wrestling match has a purpose. If the purpose is to win, the purpose is to become stronger, to become a better wrestler. And so what is this opponent? What am I here to learn from it? And it's a game, so can I somehow treat it all as being fun, like being exhilarating, being a challenge, like Lieutenant Dan on the crow's nest of Jenny. That's the the boat Jenny anyway. We're not going to go 3 hours tonight. I think we've covered a fair amount here. If there's, we're going to read a couple of the chats here. It is possible to withdraw from the draw of the moon to a great deal by serving the innermost. It is possible to withdraw from the draw of the moon to a great deal by serving the innermost. Yes, yes, it is. And someone asked, did you know or have a link that legit from Beethoven? From, you know what? There's lots of Beethoven on YouTube, and YouTube music. Lots of there's actually, you know what? Let's say, where's the keyboard? The keyboard's vanished. Let's see. This is the fourth movement. This is on YouTube. What happened to StreamYards? Oh, there we go. Hopefully we didn't vanish there for a second. This is, let me just grab you the link here. All right. This is just the fourth movement. This is what we feel is the objectively the greatest piece of music ever written, is the fourth movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And that it's objectively the greatest piece of music ever written. Not subjectively, objectively. Beethoven is a master of music for this planet, and the Ode to Joy, which is part of this movement, is unequaled. If you put yourself in a meditative state, and this is the first piece of music we ever played in public as a child, when we were still musical. We don't play musical instrument anymore. We had to give up our musical studies. But this is an incredible performance of the fourth movement, and the entire Ninth Symphony is also available online. So our recommendation, Roy, is just go onto YouTube and just do a search. There's also a radio station that we listen to on a regular basis, and it's here in Canada, and it is called, now wouldn't you know it, it doesn't show up on our feed the one time that we need it to, but it's called Classical 93 FM. And here's so these are all the past live streams, and there's usually, they usually show the live stream. And so here you don't get to choose what you listen to. But there's lots of selection, and you know, you can just put this on. It's essentially listening to the radio. But this is a radio station here in Canada, and you will have, here it is. Here's the live feed. So this is live right now in Canada, and you can put this on, and you know, you get what you get, right? And we oh, that didn't work on Facebook, but anyway, we're having difficulties sharing the link on Facebook, so let's try this again. Facebook is funny with outside links, you know. Sometimes they like them, sometimes they don't. lately they've been very adamant about deleting our comments with outside links. They claim that those comments are spam. And, well, there you have it. Let's see if there's other comments here. If anybody else has any other questions or comments, if you found this helpful or useful, by all means, share it with others. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to just keep it at 2 hours tonight. We tried to make it a valuable approach, because again, we all suffer from these ongoing repetitive things, but they don't have to be a source of suffering. We don't have to make them worse than what they are by giving into these conditioned beliefs about them. It's a wrestling match, and if you can relish and find exhilaration, be in it but not of it, put yourself in the lighthouse, watch it, observe yourself but don't identify, and dance, and do this dance with this whole thing, and recognize that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And as you're navigating life and learning to, and here's another thing, that the last thing that we'll say is acceptance, right? It is what it is. Don't fight it. Don't fight it in the moment, right? Don't fight the depression. Don't fight the anxiety. You can't. There's no point. You're just going to drain yourself of even more energy. Don't avoid it, right? If you're in such dire straits where you can't get your mind off of it and you're really going downward spiral, then yeah, okay, fine. Go out, take a walk, go out, do some housework, go to the gym, exercise, play a game, play a video game, call someone up, watch a movie, listen to some Beethoven, listen to some Mozart, listen to whatever makes you happy. And do what you need to do if you find yourself slipping and falling down into that boat, into the maelstrom, into the tidal wave, right? You can, and follow your heart, listen to your heart, listen to your innermost, listen to the guidance of your divine mother. None of us are saddled with more than what we are capable to handle. So if you're it's like in Colonel Slade said in Al Pacino's character in Scent of a Woman, if you get tangoed up, you just tango on, right? You got to shift and slip and slide and get out of that hold, get out of that half Nelson, and then get right back into that wrestling match. And eventually you get to a place where these demons, you've got them. You've got the upper hand. You're dominating the ring. And every now and then they might put a hold on you. They might get in something but you know what? You're the Hulk Hogan of your WrestleMania. And eventually you'll get a hold of these things. But you got to learn to wrestle. You can't avoid, you can't run away, and you can't allow yourself to fall into it and fall into despair and all that stuff. It is what it is, and I am that I am. And you are all who you are. We are all essences, sparks, seeds of God. And remember that. You are the lighthouse keeper. And the lighthouse keeper isn't anything without the light. Remember that. The lighthouse keeper keeps and points the light. So don't identify with the vessel. The vessel is going to go with it's going to go through. It has to go through that. That's what gives the lighthouse keeper something to do. right? That's the relationship. Because the lighthouse keeper is what keeps the vessel from crashing on the rocks in the middle of the storm. Remember that. Remember who you are. Remember yourself. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here tonight and for letting us share with you that which we have to share. So take care, and we will see all of you again soon, we hope. Take care and have a wonderful weekend. Good night.